Today, I have the honor of interviewing Watchen Nyanue. Watchen is a strategic marketing and business development executive from Liberia who resides in Chicago, Illinois. She's the founder and CEO of I Choose the Ladder, a career development agency that helps corporations develop and retain their high performing Black female talent through professional development, workshops, curated events, and digital resources. She has had the honor of working with clients such as Nike, Wonderman Thompson, Best Buy, Weber, Shandwick, and Walgreens. Before founding I Choose the Ladder, Watchen was the Senior Vice President of Marketing Partnerships with the WNBA Chicago Sky. During the past 15 years of working in corporate America, Watchen has had the privilege to work for many renowned companies, including Comedy Central, Hearst Digital, Yahoo, and Johnson Publishing Company. Watchen has been recognized as Chicago Scholars 35 Under 35 honoree, a 2018 Chicago Business Journal Woman of Influence honoree, a Biz Woman 2018 headliner, and a 2019 Black Women's Expo presented by BET Her, Phenomenal Woman honoree, 2020 WVON presented by Ariel Investments 40 Game Changers Under 40 Awards. So many accomplishments. Watchen has been featured on Forbes.com, Exo Nicole, Madame Noir, Amsterdam News, and more. Watchen holds a bachelor's in communications from DePaul University. She is currently pursuing her MBA at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Watchen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, so now is a really exciting time around remote work, and I'm so happy the conversation is happening on a national scale with major companies. Remote work eliminates commute times and childcare expenses, issues that disproportionately disadvantage Black women. It also allows more time for meal prepping and exercise, which we talk a lot about on this podcast. You know, we're all about health and wellness here. And the best thing about remote work is the ability to control your environment and make it as peaceful and zen as possible. So it's a great antidote, I think, to the toxic workplaces that stress people out. Now, with all that being said, we still have to balance it out with the fact that over 60% of Black women are the breadwinners for their families, and they're either the sole earners or make at least 40% of the family income, according to what was reported in The Atlantic. So, from your perspective, like how should folks prepare their exits as they're thinking about remote work and the possibilities for more self-care and work-life balance with this type of work situation? Like, how should folks prepare their exits for remote work at a higher position and higher pay so they don't have to feel like they're regressing by taking advantage of this?
So I think one of the things that people have to think about, and it was the unintended consequences of working from home that we saw, is that at least before there was a separation from work and home, right? Now, when people start working remotely, those boundaries got a little bit lax. And so as we think about self-care, if your work and your home are bleeding together, it makes it really hard to be intentional about self-care because you can always put it off, put it off. And what I'm here to tell you is that you cannot put it off, right? You can't take for granted that you still need to take care of yourself in the same way as if you were, like if you had a separation between home and work. And so I think as you start to think about what remote working can look like for you, some of the things to consider is what are the boundaries that you have, right? So if you have a family at home, it's going to be a very different conversation than if it's just you, a single person by yourself who has complete control over what your work environment is and what the time is. So one, thinking through what your boundaries are as it pertains to working at home. The second thing is, what are some things about the in-office environment that allowed you to be productive that you could possibly replicate when you're at home? Because what you don't want to happen is that because you are home, you now become lax in your work, which then leads to what we talked about, higher paying jobs, not being able to do that because you're not as productive, you may burn bridges. And so are there parts of your work from the office life that allowed you to be more productive and a high performer that you can replicate, right? So does that mean your office needs to look and feel a certain way? Does that mean there needs to be a separation from like your family where your kids study in one room, but you have office space in this place and everybody knows that that is your dedicated workspace? And I think also as you think about more remote work, what encourages productivity for you, right? So I am not I'm not naturally a procrastinator, but what I found in the beginning of COVID is that the comfort of being home caused me to procrastinate a little bit. And I had to get myself together to say, hey, just because you have complete control over your schedule doesn't mean that you don't have to prioritize things in the same way. And part of that prioritization was putting in my time to exercise and putting in my time to eat and putting in my time to shut it down. And I think that when you're remote, it makes it really easy to kind of get lax in those places, but you still need to be disciplined about your schedule.
And like a lot of the conversation that I see happening on LinkedIn right now with folks is that they're concerned that there won't be opportunity for career growth with remote work, right? So with that concern, I mean, do you think that's a valid concern? Do you feel like with remote work, there's a possibility that, let's say you have all this stuff set up, you're really good, you're on top of it, you're as productive as you would be in the office or probably even more. How do you make sure that you can continue to progress, make more money so you can, build wealth for yourself and your family?
Yeah. So career progression is not solely dictated by where you do work from, right? I think one of the great things about now is that technology has opened up the world, right? So that you have teams that are comprised of people from a lot of different places. What I will say though is there are going to be certain jobs where if you are managing teams that require you to be in the office, remote work may not be an option for those specific roles. If remote work is important to you, then you wouldn't consider those roles because you're not a good fit based on what that role requires and what you require in order to feel healthy and good about the work that you're doing. But I will say that, like, I've seen companies' talent pools open up because now they're not restricted to having a body in a physical place. And so what I would say is, if you are worried about career progression, your receipts of performance are what are going to help you progress, right? So doing really excellent work and having the people who have the power to make decisions about your career progression know that you are doing those things. On our podcast, we always say that 100% of the decisions about your career are going to be made when you're not in the room. So what are people saying about you when you're not in the room? That's what's going to determine your career progression, not if you sit in LA versus if you sit in New York. That may contribute to a specific role, but overall, in terms of your career, we're becoming more open and more flexible around what work can look like. And so I would say don't put problems out there or project issues that may not exist for your specific situation.
I love that point that you just said. What are people saying about you when you're not in the room? That has me thinking about like sponsorship, like a work sponsor as opposed to like a work mentor, right? What you mentioned your podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
It's called I Choose a Ladder, and we interview high performing Black female executives talking about what it took to sit in their seats, not about their specific job, because those job titles, like, those are borrowed. At any point, they could no longer be in those seats. And so we are more interested in the journey. And if there is a Black woman out there who thinks that they want to walk in her footsteps, what are some things that she should be thinking about, some skills that she should be developing, the mindset shifts that may need to happen. The most recent episode is with the chief client officer at Citi. And she's a Black woman from Nigeria, and it's just phenomenal. And the way that she thinks about leadership and innovation around leadership is amazing, phenomenal. Have not, had conversations like that. But for me, it's like, how do we prepare the next generation of leaders to be able to fully step into those leadership roles in a way that is whole and healthy and productive?
Yes, healthy leadership, because healthy leaders have healthy team members. And I know from my perspective as an integrative nutrition coach, when I work with people, I'm hearing the stories of toxic leaders, creating stress that is causing the weight gain, that is causing them to, snack on foods that they know aren't healthy, but it's like that's the comfort because they're in such a toxic work environment. And that's because the leader is not really stepping into that healthy leadership role, which I think is a pervasive issue across the board, nonprofit, for profit, like all of them. across.
But what we have to remember though is that those leaders may not know what it looks like corporate, nonprofit, whatever. Like they're not necessarily known for having healthy workspaces. We may be known for being productive, high producers, and sometimes that's at the cost. A lot of times it's at the cost of health, especially when you're thinking about Black women, right? My sister and I were talking about it this weekend. You hear all of the things that they say kill Black people, right? So it's like heart disease, it's weight gain, it's all those things. We never talk about how stress contributes to all of those things, right? Mm-hmm. It's always the symptoms and not necessarily the root cause. And most of us, especially if you are a high performing Black woman, you are probably working in a high stress job or a high stress environment that may not be the healthiest for you. That's going to show up somewhere. It's going to show up in your body. It's going to show up in your attitude. It's going to show up in a lot of places, but we never really get to the root of like how the environments then trickle down to other unhealthy ways within our lives and within our bodies.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. And last week, prior to this episode, we're talking with a nonprofit leader who basically had to quit her job due to doctor's orders because of stress. And she was working for a vegan nonprofit. And you would expect, if you're an ethical company, right? You care about the animals, you should care about humans who are also animals, you know what I'm saying? And so it's really interesting to me. Like that part, I think is really, really important. And hopefully folks, around the country and their companies are talking about 360 degree reviews, because it has to be fixed, or else, we're all just the blind leading the blind. We'll never get to a culture of health in this country if we don't have, healthy, health conscious leaders.
And I think the pandemic is kind of pushing us, has it accelerated that conversation, because our health, right, our whole health is something that got brought to the forefront in a way that I don't think it's ever happened before, right? Like the intersection of all the things that happened in the last 16 months, right? So the global pandemic, the racial injustice, like there was just a lot that was happening. And like, I think we are now forced to be thinking about ourselves and our bodies in ways that we had not had to prior.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So in this remote work situation, right, you talked about your podcast, which is awesome. I definitely highly recommend, and that link will be in the show notes so folks can learn from those people's experiences and like how to advance even if they're in a remote work situation. Because like you said, I'm gathering it's basically the same rules apply. It doesn't matter if you're working from home or not, right? Which means that networking is still key.
Yes.
Right. So how do folks take advantage of networking opportunities if they're working from home, and how exactly should those conversations go?
I think one of the mistakes that people make with networking is that it's always transactional. It's always, what can I get? And so there's anxiety around reaching out to people, right? Because you know that you're going to ask for something. In this new space, your networking needs to be about relationship building and a genuine curiosity about the people that you're connecting with, right? So you should have a reason for reaching out to someone, not because they can do something for you, but because there's a connection there that you plan to nurture over time, right? And with technology, things like LinkedIn, second degree connections on LinkedIn, people from college who you had forgotten about, reach out to the people who you genuinely have a curiosity about. If they've done some work that you find impressive, if there's something that you have that you think that they can benefit from, start there. Have that as a starting point for connection. But I think now it's easier than ever because people are craving human connection. People are craving relationships. And so find a point of intersection that you and that person have, and then just reach out. But your first email should not be asking for something. That just kind of sets a pretty bad tone to the relationship. But it's what can you give and who are you genuinely interested in relationship building with?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So those conversations, like you're sending an email, hey, I noticed that I saw that you like pasta because you posted it in the, interweb or whatever. I also like pasta. Let's talk about it for 15 minutes or something, right?
Or is like, so for me, for example, if you've listened to the last podcast episode and there was a part that stood out to you, email me about it, right? Because that's a jumping point. If you know that all of my work is around Black women in corporate. If you find an article that you think is interesting, DM me, send it to me, right? If you find that, that we're planning a career summit, and you're like, hey, here's something that I saw about conference planning, right? Find something that is a connection point that shows that you have a little bit of skin in the game, that you have actually done some research, and you're not sending a bunch of cold emails to people and just praying that one of them responds to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, you know, I like to do book recommendations too, to really give people, because I find that books go into details and people can really sit in and try to wrap their heads around how to approach a situation. What books would you recommend, like around this topic of networking, relationship building, and how, you know, using it as a means to really build wealth and increase your income?
So I don't know if this, well, it's a sales book. It's the #1 sales book ever. And it's called Influence by Robert Cialdini. If
Yes.
you have not read Influence, I don't know what you're doing with your life. You need to read Influence, right? It's a really, really good book about how you influence people. The caution is like, don't abuse the information that's in there because it is good stuff, but I always recommend Influence. I also, for sales folks, the Little Red Book of Selling is amazing. It's a small book. You could read it probably in like an hour. I think that that's great. And then in terms of other podcasts, so I listen to the Tim Ferriss show. It is a long, like his podcast is somewhere around 2 hours, 2.5 hours, but he interviews world-class performers, right? So like a LeBron, and it's a deep dive conversation that you don't even know that the conversation's lasting that long. But a lot of what I know and I think about comes from conversations that he's had with people who are like out of this world amazing. And it helps me reframe a lot of the things that I think.
I'm glad I asked that question, because you mentioned stuff Tim Ferriss would have never come to mind.
Really?
When thinking about this, never. So
Yeah.
that's quite interesting. That's pretty cool. And you mentioned the summit you're doing, the Climb Career Summit, which is coming up September 25th. Tell us about this. What can people expect to learn in this summit?
Sure. So what we found is that a lot of conferences focus on technical things, but if you're a Black woman, you have the technical abilities to do your job. What the issue is the soft skills and the rules of the game that nobody tells us that we're playing. And so we go in with one set of expectations about what's required from us, and we get there and we're like, wait, hold on, this is not right. And so the Climb is a soft skills conference, right? And it's approached specifically from the challenges, the unique challenges that Black women face in corporate. So for example, one of the sessions this year is around the mind-body connection. What are the things that are happening at work that are then impacting your body in ways that you may not know? So things like stress, right? How does that impact you? Being in a work culture that may not necessarily be for you, microaggressions and all those things, how do they impact a Black woman to be able to function in that space? And so it's a fun conference. It's virtual this year. All of the topics are going to be around soft skills. So one of the panels is on managing imposter syndrome. And so we have high-level Black women talking about what they've done over the course of their career to help manage something that most women, but especially Black women, deal with, and how it can hinder your career progression if you don't have, tools and resources to be able to manage it effectively. So it's an all-day conference. Everybody who's on a stage is a Black woman. The attendees can be anyone as long as you're okay with learning from a Black woman. And we have all soft skill topics based on things that have been articulated to us as like areas that people are trying to develop in, Black women are trying to develop in. And so it should be tons of fun.
Yeah, I really love that, because I was just actually having a conversation with one of my summit speakers, because I'm also hosting a summit this year in October, the Raw Food Health Empowerment Summit. And we were talking about, customer service when it comes to specifically Black women from New York, because we have a certain type of way in which we communicate. We're very real, sometimes a little bit too real for folks. And so that definitely I've noticed is an area of opportunity for us to grow on a professional manner. And I know me personally, imposter syndrome has caused me in the workspace to say things that I should not have said. Now, look in hindsight, like I should not have said those, but because I was in my own feelings and lacking confidence,
Yeah.
so that is really important.
Yeah.
Confidence and trying to overcome imposter syndrome and, fine tuning those soft skills, really, really crucial.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned, so the last podcast, TT is African, and African women communicate in a very specific way. And so we talked about over the course of her career, how her communication style has changed. Because as you become a senior leader, you can't necessarily talk to people in the way that maybe your culture has trained you to speak and communicate, because what works here may not work there. And so she talks about how the intensity of the way that she communicates has changed over time. Her message has not, right? But the way in which it's delivered has definitely changed over time. But it's things like that we don't talk about, that people don't necessarily take into account, because for us, it's like, I'm being authentically me. Yeah, but if you're not getting the results that you desire, is it really working, right? So if you think about customer service, if you are not retaining your customers, is the way that you're doing customer service working? I would say no, and then you need to make decisions on what you can change in order to be able to meet whatever goals that you have set for yourself or for your business.
Yeah, yeah. And you have this really cute, first of all, I love your shop. I love the bottle that talks about like where you put in your wins and stuff.
Yep.
I just think it's so cute. And you have a review planner that folks can use right now, even before the summit comes online. So tell us about it. What inspired it and how will it help folks?
So it came from me hearing about a lot of Black women getting their feelings hurt at the end of the year when they went for the performance reviews and the target for success had moved. You've been working yourself, you've burnt yourself out, but now you know that like what they were measuring isn't necessarily what you were working on. You said yes to a bunch of things, right? You are working harder than your colleagues, and then you get there and they're promoted and you're not, right? And so the review planner is a systematic way to hold yourself and your manager accountable for your career progression. So it has things like, what kinds of questions should you be asking in your performance review? If I asked you right now, how is your manager measuring your success for this year? And you don't know, you're going to get your feelings hurt in your performance review, because you're still going to do a lot of work, but you don't know if what you're doing is getting you closer to or further from where you're trying to be. And so it's like questions to ask in your performance reviews. Then there are ways to track every month. And then there are ways to track quarterly. There are touch points to make sure that the target for your success hasn't changed. And then at the end of the planner, there's a sheet that says, take me with you to your performance review. And everything on that sheet is tied to what your manager told you that you were being measured at. And it's all of your receipts. And what that does is it changes the conversation from your feelings about things to the facts of what's happened over the course of the year. So now we just need to discuss what comes after this. It's not a renegotiation of what I'm supposed to be doing and all that, because we've already agreed on this month after month going through the year. So for us, it's a way to empower employees to take control of their careers, but it's also a way to keep everybody accountable for the success that we say that we want within the corporate space.
That's perfect. I love it. I love it. It's so methodical, plans everything out. So all you have to do is just follow the book and just follow those guidelines. And I just love it so much. And it has a beautiful gold binding. So, you're inspired every time you look at it, like this is the goal,
It is. And you are clear. If you're nothing else, you're clear, right?
Yeah.
And if at the end of the year, you go and the target has moved, and then the next year you go and the target is moved, then you can start to recognize patterns, and you can use that data to make an informed decision about your career.
Yeah.
Not an emotional decision because of how you feel, but once you have the data, you can use that to back up what you ask for, but also to be comfortable and confident in the decisions that you make about your career.
That's awesome. So how can folks connect with you online?
Sure. So where I am the most active is Instagram. So you can do I Choose a Ladder is our business page. My personal page is I See You Watching. And then if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, you can text CLIMB. So it's CLIMB to 66866. But happy to connect with folks. My goal is to have us have careers that are healthy and whole, that we love and we feel proud of. So in any way that I can help with that, I'm happy to do so.
Awesome. Your business is such a blessing. So thank you so much for being yourself and for showing up for people.
Thank you.